What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Lily James film, Yesterday. Yesterday is directed by Danny Boyle, stars Himesh Patel, Lily James, Kate McKinnon, and Ed Sheeran. It tells the story of a basically failed musician who, after deciding that he has done his final show, on his bike ride back home, he gets hit by a bus when all of the power around the world goes out. When he wakes up in the hospital, no one seems to remember who the Beatles are, so he has to make the decision whether or not he should use their music to become really famous, and when he does, it causes a lot of problems for him in his life. I think the premise for this film is really great. I think that it's such an original, fantastic idea that, this guy gets knocked out and then when he wakes up, nobody knows who the Beatles are, and he's able to utilize something that is so well known around the world by everyone. Basically, everyone knows at least a single Beatles song, if not multiple. And he's able to use that to gain fame and fortune and all of these things that he's always wanted his whole life. But all of the different aspects of that fame and fortune and success then cause issues in the life that he's known and loved for such a long time. So I think that the premise of this film is extremely strong. And then I also think the performances are a very bright part of this film. Himesh Patel, who I have never seen in anything, was really good in the musical sequences. He really landed all of the emotional, more love story based scenes, and I think he was a fantastic choice because going in as an unknown, it made it a lot easier for everyone watching the film, I think, to view this guy as the character he was playing. He's this failed musician who now has this chance at success. And if you would have gotten some extremely famous person in that role, I don't think it would have, cohesively fit with the story as well. Lily James is also very good. I think she's continuing to show that she's one of the most talented actresses in Hollywood right now. She really impressed me in The Darkest Hour last year, and I think this movie, again, she does a very good job. Even though this is very much tonally different from the things that she's done before, I still really enjoyed her in the role. The movie also does have a lot more comedy than I expected it to. I thought that this was going to be very much like kind of a fantasy drama with some lightheartedness thrown in because the premise is kind of crazy, but it actually has a lot of comedy in there, and some of it is kind of spoilery, so I can't really talk about why certain things are funny, but the two people that I do want to call out for being very funny are Joel Fry and Kate McKinnon, who both of their characters bring a lot of good levity to the story, especially as the story progresses and maybe gets a little more downtrodden. I think that they're always a very bright part of the story. However, I do have some issues with the film. My first one is Danny Boyle as director. I do like some of Danny Boyle's films, but I think one of Danny Boyle's weaknesses is the fact that he always wants to try to visually change the way a film should look to the point where the visualization is distracting from the film. And I think that that's what happens a lot in this movie, for me at least. He uses a lot of dream sequences that feel very out of place, that don't feel like they were written in the script. It seems like he chose to take this sequence that's happening and turn it into that because it doesn't fit with the storytelling. And alongside that, there's just a lot of unnecessary Dutch tilts and weird camera angles that don't add anything to the storytelling. When you utilize specific camera movements, they're there for a reason. For example, in The West Wing, when Aaron Sorkin would write lines of dialogue that were like a monologue or a conversation between two people doing the classic walk and talk on that show, they would do a consistent tracking shot of those people walking through the hallway because that tracking shot is showcasing the speed at which their minds are going and the speed at which information is passing. They don't have time to even cut the camera. But when you utilize something like a Dutch tilt, which is when the camera is sort of curved, that's there to sort of showcase confusion or disorientation or sort of those types of feelings. But instead, when you just use them in a regular scene, at least for someone who I think is more aware of camera work, it's very distracting because it feels extremely out of place. But by far my biggest issue with this film is that it didn't really follow through on the premise. So as I said, I really think the premise for this film has legs. It's a fantastic idea for a movie. But my issue is that they decided to instead go down the route of a interesting, love letter to the Beatles. They decided that they wanted to tell just sort of a generic rom-com story that maybe happens to have a somewhat more interesting plot, but they never utilized that plot to its fullest extent, in my opinion. They don't utilize the music to its fullest extent. It just feels like they had this awesome idea, but instead of sort of following through with this love letter to the Beatles about this guy who has this crazy opportunity, and the film being about finding yourself and realizing who you're supposed to be, no matter what, instead it decided to just sort of turn into a rom-com, and that was extremely disappointing for me. I'm gonna give Yesterday a C. This movie had all of the promise in the world to be really great, but instead it just sort of fell down to mediocrity. If you're a massive Beatles fan, it might still be worth seeing in theaters, but honestly, I think most people could wait for it to come to Netflix to give it a watch. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of yesterday, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and I hope to see you guys later.